Case 1. Krisha Stroud. In April 2024, a violent attack took place in Gateshead, leading to the tragic death of 54-year-old Gary Belfield and the serious injury of his son, Luke Williams. The incident was no random act of violence. It was orchestrated by a group of teenagers led by a 15-year-old girl named Krisha Stroud, who believed her family's dog had been stolen. But this crime went beyond a dispute over a pet. This was an attack with a shocking and brutal outcome. The motive behind this brutal act stemmed from a personal grievance. Krisha Stroud, who was only 15 years old at the time, believed that Gary Belfield's dog had once belonged to her half-sister, Courtney. Stroud's obsession with retrieving the dog led her to recruit two older teens, Leandra Lopez and Jordan Tams, both 17, to carry out the attack. She thought that by confronting Belfield, she could resolve the situation. Little did she know, her actions would escalate into a deadly confrontation, leaving one man dead and another seriously injured, all over a disagreement about a dog. Krisha Stroud didn't just passively involve herself in the crime. She was the mastermind behind the plan. While she didn't physically enter Belfield's home, she was actively involved in the preparation. Stroud knew the attackers, Lopez and Tams, would be armed and had the knowledge that the assault was planned to be deadly. The teenagers made their way to Belfield's home, carrying knives with the intent to intimidate him and retrieve the dog. However, things quickly spiraled out of control. On the fateful day of April 27, 2024, the teens approached Gary Belfield's home. Gary, who was home with his son Luke, had no idea what was coming. Lopez and Tams attacked Gary, stabbing him repeatedly. The violence was swift and relentless. Gary was fatally wounded, with multiple stab wounds, including a fatal injury to his thigh. Meanwhile, Luke tried to intervene, but he too was attacked. Although he managed to escape, he was left with severe injuries. The two assailants left the scene, leaving behind two victims, one of whom would later succumb to his wounds. While Lopez and Tams were the ones carrying out the attack, Krisha Stroud's role was undeniable. She may not have been physically present at the scene, but she played a critical part in orchestrating the crime. The brutal nature of the attack, combined with the fact that it was carried out by children, shocked the public. Krisha Stroud and her accomplices were immediately apprehended, and the case quickly gained national attention. This wasn't just another crime. It was a case that raised questions about youth violence and the responsibility of individuals who orchestrate such acts. The trial of Krisha Stroud, Leandra Lopez, and Jordan Tams began in 2025, with the prosecution laying out the gruesome details of the crime. The court heard how the attack was planned and executed, with Krisha Stroud playing a pivotal role in its orchestration. All three were convicted, Stroud for murder and the two men for manslaughter. The judge was clear in his condemnation of the crime, stating that the violence was utterly senseless. Stroud was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 20 years, while Lopez and Tams received lesser sentences. The trial sent a strong message about youth violence and accountability. Case 2. Isabella Guzman. Isabella Guzman's tragic story starts in Aurora, Colorado, where she lived with her mother, Sylvia Guzman. From an early age, Isabella's relationship with her mother was deeply strained. Sylvia was known to be strict and controlling, while Isabella, often feeling isolated, struggled to meet her mother's expectations. This created a constant tension at home, with emotional conflict building over the years. While on the outside, their family seemed typical, behind closed doors, it was a volatile environment. This ongoing friction would set the stage for the violent and heartbreaking events that would soon unfold. As Isabella entered her teenage years, the tension with her mother grew more intense. Isabella's emotional state worsened, marked by signs of depression, anger, and a deep sense of isolation. Sylvia's strict discipline clashed with Isabella's growing desire for independence, creating an unrelenting emotional battle. Friends and family noted that Isabella's mental health was deteriorating, but there were few attempts to seek professional help. The constant fighting, coupled with Isabella's emotional turmoil, pushed her to the edge. By the time she was 18, the young woman was at a breaking point, unable to cope with the overwhelming pressure at home. On August 28, 2013, the tragic event unfolded. The confrontation between Isabella and her mother reached a deadly climax. According to reports, the argument escalated into a violent struggle inside the family home. Isabella, in a fit of rage and frustration, attacked her mother, stabbing her repeatedly. The violent act was shocking, especially given Isabella's previous struggles with mental health. Her mother, Sylvia, tragically succumbed to her injuries. The brutality of the attack left investigators and the community in disbelief. A daughter had killed her own mother, an unimaginable crime that would soon capture the nation's attention. After the murder, Isabella fled the scene, leaving behind the bloody aftermath. She was later found by authorities wandering the streets of Aurora. The police were called to investigate the scene, where they found Sylvia's lifeless body. Isabella was arrested shortly after, and news of her involvement in her mother's death spread rapidly. The case drew widespread media attention, with many questioning how a daughter could commit such a heinous act. Isabella was charged with first-degree murder, and her story became the subject of national headlines, as people tried to understand what had driven her to commit such a horrific crime. Family and friends spoke about Isabella's history of emotional struggles, including depression, isolation, and feelings of rejection. Some argued that her mother's strictness and emotional neglect had contributed to Isabella's deteriorating mental health. Reports from her defense team revealed that Isabella had been struggling with suicidal thoughts and severe anxiety for years. Many believed her emotional distress was the primary factor in the tragic decision to murder her mother. The defense team painted a picture of a young woman who was not in control of her actions. In 2014, Isabella was declared mentally incompetent to face trial. A judge determined that Isabella was not fit to face the legal process at that time, citing her mental health condition. This decision sparked a debate about the fairness of trying someone who may not fully understand the consequences of their actions. Isabella was sent for treatment in a psychiatric facility, where she would receive care and undergo therapy in an attempt to stabilize her condition. Case 3. Rachel Marie Wade. In 2008, two young women, Rachel Marie Wade and Sarah Ludeman, found themselves in a bitter rivalry over the same man, Josh Camacho. The relationship between Rachel and Josh was tumultuous, marked by jealousy and anger. Sarah, also involved with Josh, became a target of Rachel's aggression. The two women clashed multiple times, exchanging harsh words and threats. Tensions mounted as both women fought for Josh's attention. The situation escalated, and the hostility between them became more intense. Their interactions were fueled by the complex dynamics of love, jealousy, and emotional instability. Little did they know, their rivalry would take a deadly turn. On April 14, 2009, Rachel Wade, now 18, encountered Sarah Ludeman in Pinellas Park, Florida. It wasn't the first time the two had clashed, but this night would change everything. Witnesses say the confrontation began with heated words and escalated quickly. Rachel, who had been threatening Sarah for weeks, approached her during a heated exchange. The confrontation moved from verbal insults to physical aggression, with Rachel allegedly pulling out a knife. In the midst of the altercation, Rachel stabbed Sarah. The 18-year-old was left to bleed out on the pavement. The deadly fight was the tragic result of months of escalating tension. As Sarah collapsed to the ground, Rachel fled the scene. Witnesses immediately called 911, and emergency responders rushed to the location, but it was too late. Sarah Ludeman was pronounced dead at the scene from a single stab wound to the chest. The 911 call that followed captured the panic and confusion of the witnesses, who were in disbelief over what had just happened. Rachel Wade, feeling the weight of the crime, attempted to cover her tracks but was unable to escape the consequences. Authorities quickly began their investigation, with Rachel at the center of their focus. The police investigation into Sarah Ludeman's death quickly turned to Rachel. Witnesses had seen Rachel and Sarah argue earlier that evening, and several of Rachel's friends confirmed her aggressive behavior toward Sarah in the days leading up to the confrontation. The police also uncovered a series of threatening voicemails Rachel had left for Sarah. These messages revealed a deep sense of animosity and intent to harm Sarah. Investigators pieced together the events, including the fact that Rachel had been following Sarah's movements for weeks. The evidence pointed to Rachel as the one who instigated the deadly altercation. In 2010, Rachel Wade's trial for second-degree murder began. The prosecution presented a case that focused on Rachel's history of threats and her violent actions on the night of the murder. Key witnesses testified about Rachel's confrontational nature and her obsession with Josh. They argued that the murder wasn't a result of self-defense, as Rachel had claimed, but an intentional act born out of jealousy and rage. The defense, on the other hand, sought to use Florida's Stand Your Ground law, arguing that Rachel was defending herself from an aggressive Sarah. The jury would soon decide her fate. After a tense week of testimony, the jury deliberated for just a few hours before returning with the verdict. Rachel Wade was guilty of second-degree murder. Despite her claims of self-defense, the jury believed that Rachel had acted with malice and intent. The case had captivated the public, with many seeing Rachel's actions as a tragic outcome of a love triangle gone wrong. The verdict was a reminder of the dangers of unresolved jealousy and the consequences of unchecked aggression. Rachel's life would now be forever changed as she faced the reality of her conviction. On September 3, 2010, Rachel Wade was sentenced to 27 years in prison for the second-degree murder of Sarah Ludeman. The sentencing brought mixed reactions. Some people believed the punishment was too lenient, given the brutality of the crime, while others felt Rachel's age and emotional state should be considered. Rachel's supporters argued that she had been a victim of her emotions and the toxic relationship with Josh. However, the Ludeman family, devastated by the loss of their daughter, expressed relief that justice had been served. Rachel's sentence was a harsh reminder of the far-reaching consequences of impulsive actions. Rachel Wade's case remains a cautionary tale about the dangers of jealousy, emotional instability, and unresolved conflict. Case 4. Charlie Elely. In 2011, the brutal murder of 15-year-old Seth Jackson in Summerfield, Florida, shocked the nation. Seth, a teenager with a passion for life, became a victim of a cruel and calculated crime orchestrated by people close to him. What seemed like a normal friendship turned into a deadly plot, luring Seth into a horrific trap. The case involved a group of teenagers, including Charlie K. Elely, a young girl with ties to Seth's ex-girlfriend, Amber Wright. But beneath the surface of a love triangle was a darker, more sinister motive. Seth Jackson's death was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a planned and orchestrated crime rooted in a tangled web of jealousy, revenge, and betrayal. Charlie Elely, Amber Wright, and several other individuals were involved in the plot. Amber's romantic entanglements and ongoing animosity with Seth became the driving force behind the murder. Elely, who had a troubled past and was linked to Amber's social circle, played a pivotal role in drawing Seth into the deadly trap. The plan was set into motion when Seth was lured to a house under the false pretense of meeting up with Amber. On the day of Seth's death, he was ambushed at Charlie Eley's house by a group of people, including Amber Wright, Justin Soto, Kyle Hooper, and Michael Bargo. Once inside, Seth was violently attacked. He was beaten, shot, and then thrown into a fire pit. Bargo, the main perpetrator, was identified as the shooter. The group didn't just murder Halseth, they made efforts to cover up their crime in an unimaginable way. They burned Halseth's body in a fire pit to destroy all evidence of the horrific act. The remains were then disposed of in a lime pit. Days after Halseth was murdered, his family began to worry about his whereabouts. His disappearance sparked an investigation that would soon uncover the truth. The crime scene was gruesome. Investigators discovered the remains in a lime pit, but what was even more shocking was the involvement of his so-called friends in the crime. Charlie Elely, Amber Wright, and the others were soon identified as the perpetrators, and the investigation quickly turned into a race to uncover the motive. What initially seemed like a missing persons case soon spiraled into one of Florida's most chilling murder investigations. As the investigation continued, the authorities arrested the key players involved in Halseth's murder. Amber Wright, Halseth's ex-girlfriend, was one of the first to be taken into custody. She, along with Charlie Elely, Justin Soto, Kyle Hooper, and Michael Bargo, were charged with first-degree murder. The shocking part of this case was the involvement of a group of young people, all of whom had ties to Halseth. As the charges were read, it became clear that this was not a random act of violence, but rather the result of careful manipulation and premeditated malice. The trial of Charlie Elely and her co-defendants was a highly publicized event. Elely, along with the others, faced charges of murder and conspiracy to commit murder. During the trial, the prosecution painted a picture of a group of teenagers who, driven by jealousy and resentment, planned and executed the murder of a young boy. The shocking details of the crime, including the brutal beating and burning of Halseth's body, left the courtroom in stunned silence. In the end, Charlie Elely was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After serving several years of her life sentence, Charlie Elely's case took an unexpected turn. In 2020, her conviction was vacated by a federal judge who ruled that her trial attorney had provided ineffective counsel. Elely's original conviction was based in part on her statements during an interrogation, where she had been influenced by inadmissible evidence and statements from other co-defendants. With this ruling, Elely was granted a new chance at justice. She pled guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree murder and received a reduced sentence of 10 years in prison. Charlie Elely's release from prison in 2020 marked the end of a long legal battle. Having served 9 years for the crime, she walked out of prison after her conviction was reduced. Since her release, Elely has kept a low profile, staying out of the public eye. There have been no reports of her re-engaging with the media or making public statements. Elely's life after prison remains largely private, and she has avoided social media. As for Halseth Jackson's family, their pain and grief remain, but the legal process has been a long and tumultuous journey for them, with no easy answers or closure. Case 5. Sierra Halseth. In April 2021, a chilling crime unfolded in Las Vegas, Nevada. Sierra Halseth, a 16-year-old girl, and her 18-year-old boyfriend, Aaron Guerrero, would become responsible for the brutal murder of Sierra's father, Daniel Halseth. The crime was shocking not only because of its brutality, but also because it was committed by someone so young. Daniel was stabbed over 70 times, set on fire, and his body was left in his own garage. The young couple fled the scene using Daniel's car and debit card, but their escape would be short-lived. In just 4 days, they were captured in Salt Lake City. This is the tragic story of betrayal, murder, and the dark secret that led to it. The relationship between Sierra and Aaron was secretive and intense. Despite their parents' disapproval, the couple was determined to be together. They had been plotting to run away to Los Angeles, but their plans were discovered and their families forbade them from seeing each other. In retaliation, they decided to take matters into their own hands. Just days before the murder, they purchased items like a circular saw, bleach, saw blades, and lighter fluid. These items were later found at the crime scene, and surveillance footage showed them buying these tools in preparation for the horrific act they were about to commit. On April 9, 2021, Sierra and Aaron carried out their plan. They lured Daniel into his garage, where Aaron repeatedly stabbed him over 70 times. After the brutal assault, the couple set Daniel's body on fire in an attempt to destroy evidence. They left the scene in Daniel's car, using his debit card to withdraw money and flee the city. But the severity of the crime didn't go unnoticed. The couple's actions, especially their use of Daniel's bank card, quickly alerted authorities, and the police were able to track them down within days. The cold, calculated nature of the murder sent shockwaves through the community. After the murder, as the legal proceedings began, Sierra and Aaron were charged with multiple crimes, including murder with a deadly weapon, conspiracy to commit murder, arson, robbery, and fraud. In October 2022, both defendants pleaded guilty to all charges. Sierra, who had once been a loving daughter, was now facing the consequences of her actions. Aaron, her older boyfriend, was equally culpable. The case highlighted the dangerous influence a relationship can have, especially when it leads a teenager to commit such a heinous act. The trial was a sobering reminder of how easily a young person can be manipulated into a life-altering decision. During the sentencing hearing, Sierra made allegations against her father, claiming that Daniel had sexually and physically abused her for years. Her mother, Elizabeth Helgelane, supported these claims, stating that the authorities had failed to protect her daughter. However, Daniel's family, including his mother, disputed these accusations. They believed Sierra was lying, perhaps trying to justify her actions. The courtroom became a battleground for differing opinions. Whether the allegations were true or not, they painted a picture of a deeply troubled family dynamic that may have contributed to the events that led to the murder. The case drew widespread media attention, not only because of the brutal nature of the crime, but also because of the involvement of a teenager. The idea that a young girl could murder her father shocked many. To make matters worse, a disturbing video emerged showing Sierra and Aaron laughing and discussing the murder shortly after they had killed Daniel. The footage, which was shared widely on social media. Case 6. Tess Damm. Tess Damm, a 15-year-old high school student from Lafayette, Colorado, lived with her mother, Linda Damm, a 52-year-old single mother. Their relationship was fraught with tension. Linda struggled with alcoholism, which led to erratic behavior and neglect, creating a volatile home environment. Police records indicate multiple visits to their home over the years for incidents such as runaway reports and underage drinking citations. Tess frequently expressed feelings of anger and frustration towards her mother, describing her as an angry, raging, functional alcoholic in online posts. These strained dynamics set the stage for the tragic events that would unfold in early 2007. In March 2007, Tess Damm and her 19-year-old boyfriend, Brian Grove, had grown increasingly rebellious. They had been living together in a small apartment after Tess had moved out of her mother's house. In the midst of this, Linda Damm's whereabouts became suspicious. Tess and Brian informed authorities that Linda had gone missing, claiming she had left to visit a friend. But the inconsistencies in their story quickly caught the attention of investigators. A few weeks later, in April, the police discovered a body in the storage unit rented by Tess and Brian. It was Linda Damm's body, hidden in a suitcase. The investigation revealed the horrifying truth. Linda Damm had been murdered, Tess confessed that she and Brian had brutally attacked Linda during an argument. Tess later explained in interviews that the fight escalated after Linda found out about the relationship between Tess and Brian, which she disapproved of. Tess, who had grown tired of her mother's abusive behavior, revealed that she had become involved in the murder to escape the suffocating control Linda had over her. The details of the murder were chilling, with Brian allegedly strangling Linda while Tess participated in the violent act. Tess's actions were driven by years of pent-up frustration, anger, and desire for independence. According to the prosecution, she had long been the victim of her mother's verbal and emotional abuse. Tess, desperate for freedom and to sever ties with her troubled family life, seemed to have acted in what she believed was self-defense, though the brutality of the crime painted a much darker picture. Brian Grove, Tess's boyfriend, also played a significant role in the murder, but it was Tess who had planned the crime. The combination of her mother's toxic influence and her relationship with Brian led to a deadly outcome. Following the discovery of Linda Damm's body, Tess and Brian were arrested. Investigators quickly realized that the two had hidden the body for weeks, concealing it in a storage unit and failing to report the crime until they were eventually caught. Tess and Brian were charged with first-degree murder. As they faced the repercussions of their crime, the local community was shocked and saddened by the betrayal of trust and the brutal way Tess, a teenager, had taken her mother's life. The trial of Tess Damm and Brian Grove began in 2008, with Tess facing charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and other related offenses. During the trial, Tess's defense attorneys argued that she had been under significant emotional distress and had acted out of fear of her mother's control over her life. They painted a picture of a troubled young girl seeking to break free from a toxic environment. Ultimately, Tess was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, while Brian received a similar sentence. The court's decision underscored the severity of the crime and the consequences of the deadly choice Tess had made. If this case shocked you as much as it did us, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on the Tess Damm case. Do you think her upbringing played a significant role in the tragic events that unfolded? Also, if you know someone who might be struggling with family issues or emotional distress, remember that seeking help can make all the difference. Reach out, start the conversation, and share resources. We're all in this together. Stay tuned for our next video where we dive deeper into another chilling true crime story.